This is the AI voice of Chris Williamson narrating a pod-slice summary of the Modern Wisdom podcast. The discussion focuses on the premise of the book by Morgan Housel, Same as Ever, which delves into the human construct of predicting future events. Housel recounts how his extensive career as a financial writer led him to investigate why humans are so poor at prediction, particularly in fields such as finance, economics, and politics. A key insight shared is that we're not poor at predicting, but rather that we're good at it. Except for surprises, which generally tend to hold the most importance and significance. Housel introduces the concept of focusing not on attempting to predict the future, but rather focusing on things that never change. Through examples spanning from business to medicine and politics, Housel discusses that similar themes repeat themselves constantly, essentially the same movie playing out with different characters. He analyzed numerous aspects of human behavior that has stood the test of time and found 23 that he considers to be powerful and recurring, using this as the premise for his book. Into the conversation, Chris and Morgan explore the fragility of history and consequently the future. They share examples from history, such as the wind changing direction and giving George Washington enough time to escape, highlighting the delicate balance and randomness that both history and the future rest on. And to aid this narrative, Morgan conveys the belief that most ground-breaking human history events, like Pearl Harbor or 9/11, held a denominator. People did not see them coming. The conversation then shifts to dissecting the mechanisms of our mind when we try to predict and control the future. A natural human inclination stemming from our need to feel secure and certain. Housel, however, encourages humility in the face of the unexpected, as it is those unforeseen elements that give shape to our history and future alike. Finally, they discuss the quote from Carl Richards, "Risk is what is left over when you think you've thought of everything," insinuating that despite our attempts to predict and navigate the future, there are still factors that will surprise us and risk will still exist. And continuing the dialogue with Morgan Housel on the Modern Wisdom podcast, they dwell on two unusual cases to illustrate unpredictability and risk. The first story features a NASA astronaut on a hot air balloon mission. Despite meticulous planning by NASA, the world's most planning-centric organization, their plans didn't account for a slight unpredictable incident. The astronaut, while executing a rescue procedure, opens up the faceplate of his helmet to get some fresh air, and this small act is what led to his demise. The water seeped into his suit, which then filled up and caused him to drown. The unpredictable factor here was the astronaut needing fresh air, exposing the real definition of risk and its uncanny nature. The next story is set during the Battle of Stalingrad in World War II. A fleet of German tanks fails to start due to wires chewed by field mice. Interestingly, while planning for all other imaginable risks, they never considered the possibility of field mice endangering their mission. These examples illustrate the unpredictability of risk and the need to brace for surprises. Housel suggests having more savings as a buffer for the risk factor you can't envision. He also warns that expecting to predict every risk is a recipe for missing the surprise every time. Savings should not be earmarked for foreseeable needs, but also for the unforeseen ones that we often miss. Housel then shifts to the topic of happiness, underscoring how closely tied it is to the gap between one's expectations and circumstances. He argues that individuals can manage their expectations better than society as a whole can. On the tendency of society and individuals to continually set higher expectations, despite notable increases in income and living conditions, is discussed. The notion of envy and its significance in this context becomes clear. Envy drives the need to match the standards set by others, which in turn leads to a constant readjustment of expectations. Despite leading to dissatisfaction, in many cases, Housel notes the silver lining, that this dissatisfaction is the source of innovation and progress. Because people are unsatisfied, they drive themselves to achieve better, and consequently, the world improves. Chris Williamson then introduces the concept of the Buddha's teaching, life is suffering, or rather, life is unsatisfactoriness. This serves to reiterate their discourse on the human tendency towards dissatisfaction and the associated risk of unmet expectations. The overarching theme in this discussion stresses on the enduring existence of risk, the inevitability of dissatisfaction, and the role of expectations in defining one's life experiences. The conversation proves insightful as it prompts a re-evaluation of personal attitudes and preparedness towards the unforeseeable facets of life. And then the dialogue continues as the two discuss the idea of wealth, status, happiness, and the relativity of it all. They share how often humans aren't wired for happiness, but rather for status. Rising in wealth or improving in status provides more joy than merely being wealthy or holding a high status. They quote the rapper Drake, "People respect you more when you are chasing something, not when you have it." They then explore the concept of success and fame and how a rapid rise might not always be a good thing. They give examples of modest workers winning a lottery or long-time academics suddenly becoming famous. They argue that sudden fame or wealth could be a psychological burden, ripping away a person's sense of self and presenting a high bar for them to continue performing. They discuss the example of an author whose series took off with the first book, but wasn't able to replicate the success with the second. They also mentioned the singer Lewis Capaldi, who, after explosive success with his first album, struggled with the pressure of replicating it with his second. The pair then shares a poignant quote from Capaldi. "Fame doesn't change you, it just changes everybody around you." This quote underscores the challenges accompanying fame and status, the impact they have not just on the individual, but those around them, thus highlighting the argument that sudden rises in wealth or status can be more counterproductive than beneficial. In other words, they suggest that although success, fame, and wealth might seem appealing, their sudden or significant rise might not always be a blessing. Instead, individuals should perhaps aim for a slower and steadier progression in their journey towards success. In this section, the conversation delves into the concept of fame and external validation, discussing those who decided to step away from the public eye when they achieved what they wanted in their respective industries. The guest mentions actress Cameron Diaz and the band Gautier as examples of individuals who chose to leave fame behind. The discussion also highlights how society tends to value observable achievements like wealth and status, often overlooking inner peace or quality of relationships. The guest talks about the exchange of these hidden metrics for observable ones, citing a startling fact. They suggest that one of the largest determinants of a person's happiness is the length of their commute, noting how people are willing to exchange time with loved ones for a pay rise, another observable metric. The hosts mentioned their attempt to make the hidden observable by implementing a system that helps keep track of daily actions linked to happiness, which are otherwise difficult to quantify. Both agree on the importance of these so-called hidden metrics in life. Mundane lifestyle expectations and their influence on happiness are examined, with the hosts conceding that high expectations can be a burden. The power of social perception and validation is also explored using examples from the lives of the wealthy. And I may touch upon the realization that often no one cares as much about one's material success as much as an individual envisions. This realization, they express, can significantly alter the approach to fame, wealth, and status. The conversation proceeds to elaborate on the notion that people who exhibit extraordinary talent or success in one area usually demonstrate deficiencies in others. Conversations around Elon Musk, Bill Gates, and Mark Zuckerberg unfold, depicting how these influential figures are unconventional in their own ways. A meaningful takeaway from the podcast is the recognition and acceptance that everyone, including admired public figures or heroes, have their own flaws or deficiencies. This understanding can positively impact personal life expectations, in turn improving individual contentment or happiness. Continuing the discussion, the talk underscores the value of role models in personal lives, putting forward the idea that admiration and respect should not be limited to celebrities or public figures, but can be extended to ordinary people who embody qualities we desire. Simplicity, integrity, and healthy lifestyle choices a person up the street makes can be as inspirational as an iconic figure's achievements. It's a riveting look at the life of John Boyd, who crafted the fighter pilot's book for the US Air Force, offers inspiring tales of his extreme personality. Boyd, regardless of his eccentric demeanor, is portrayed not as a monster, but as a genius who grappled with a formidable personality. A shift in perspective takes place as we further dive into the pitfalls of absolute certainty and binary thinking in understanding the world at large. Examples here include thumb rules for wearing seatbelts, and the incisive look at probabilities in life underscore the fact that life isn't always black and white. Specifically, in the case of the 2016 US presidential election, statistician Nate Silver's prediction is analyzed to illustrate the blurry boundary between being right and being wrong. The conversation then steers toward the harmful impact of binary thinking in areas like investment, social issues, politics, and more, alongside addressing the issue of excessive certainty. This conversation supports the idea that the world deals in shades of gray, where exact percentages do not always determine the consequences. Any narrative can be damaging or beneficial, depending on the certainty level, leading to potential misinformation. And the hosts ponder on the fact that the more certainty a person projects, the more credibility they appear to have, even when their statements are proven wrong, a phenomenon attributed to people's innate aversion to uncertainty. Hence, predictions made with utter certainty can be more appealing to people than a nuanced approach that considers all variables. This leads to some reflection on the nature of forecasting and expertise. The hosts assert that absolute certainty can be more seductive than factual accuracy, discussing situations where proficiency in a certain area often gets conflated with expertise in unrelated domains. This issue, they note, means that public figures often share views on subjects they know little about, generating more problem-solving noise while offering minimal value. This point brings to light the misuse of influence and followership. Reflecting on the precarious balance between predictions and probabilities, the hosts share the realization that humans naturally yearn for certainty. However, they acknowledge that even the most definitive predictions are, at best, probabilities in disguise. The uncertainty about the future persists, leaving a trail of caution towards absolutists. Diving further into the discussion, the speakers explore the idea of success. They acknowledge that while some individuals may effortlessly establish a blueprint for success based on their personal journey, this does not necessarily translate into universal success strategies. Many factors, including personality quirks, cultural backgrounds, and individual circumstances, contribute to one's success. Thank you, Warren Buffett. As an example, Housel suggests that though Buffett has enviable investment prowess, attempting to mimic his stock picking techniques might not yield the same results today given the different market conditions. Moreover, the talk narrows down the significance of storytelling when it comes to winning people over, noting that captivating narratives often trump mere statistics, even in cases where the right solutions are in hand. So Chris Williamson and Morgan Housel agree that individuals armed with both factual accuracy and storytelling skill have the potential to influence others most significantly. The conversation examines Ken Burns, the renowned American documentary filmmaker who uses music to enhance the emotional impact of his films and prioritizes storytelling to engage audiences, regardless of whether the information is new. They point out that the allure of good storytelling has helped Burns attract more viewers than the annual Super Bowl, a testament to the power of a compelling narrative. Housel discusses Martin Luther King's "I Have a Dream" speech as another instance of the effectiveness of storytelling. King's adept shift from a scripted talk to an impromptu delivery, prompted by a member of the audience, resulted in one of the most memorable speeches of modern history. The hosts propose that when dealing with complicated topics, storytelling provides leverage. It simplifies complexity and facilitates understanding even with potentially dull subjects like physics. This can transform a tedious topic into an engrossing narrative that keeps the audience hooked, making storytelling an invaluable skill across various domains. Finally, the discussion posits that narratives have immense influential potential and can offer considerable opportunities, particularly when used to elucidate complex topics. This conversation reinforces the idea that compelling storytelling can help establish credibility, foster understanding, and galvanize people into action more effectively than dry, raw data on the seeds of crisis. In the fields of decision-making and success, the dialogue manifests a paradox that isn't often apparent. Calmness leads to volatility. This ideology is exemplified during periods of economic stability when optimism grows, leading individuals to accrue debts based on their future confidence. Eventually, this debt-infused optimism creates instability, giving birth to unavoidable recessions. Similar to the adage, pride goes before a fall, The host contends periods of economic tranquility sow the seeds for financial crises. Included in the conversation is an analysis of the influence of emotions and mentality on performance, particularly in high-stakes scenarios such as sports. In such contexts, physiological capabilities alone cannot guarantee victory. Citing Michaela Schifrin, an accomplished skier, it's evident that high-stress situations cause physiological responses in athletes like nervous vomiting, which can't be replicated in their training. An interesting part of this dialogue involves a DJ friend who demonstrates severe anxiety before performances too, underscoring the fact that the environment's pressure can significantly alter an individual's cognitive and physical state. The conversation seems to argue that separating individuals from their emotions, nerves, and human factors is, in essence, a disservice to fully understanding their potential and explaining their actions. The conversation further explores how these human elements and emotions, which fail to fit neatly into logical formulas or models, can significantly influence significant historical events. A case in point is Nazi Germany, led by Adolf Hitler under the influence of dubious medical practices by his physician Theodor Morell, leading to irrational decisions. The idea of context significantly altering outcomes or behaviors is underscored again when speaking about Theodor Morell's handling of Hitler and soldiers during war. The host mentioned the high number of soldiers who don't actually fire at the enemy in the field, despite their training, because when confronted with the reality of battle, empathy or fear might kick in, contradicting their training. The host also makes a thought-provoking observation that Wall Street's action of keeping stock markets artificially buoyant would eventually lead to inflated stock values and catastrophic crashes. Ultimately, the conversation seeks to explore the complexity of human decision-making and the impossibility of precisely predicting it with logic alone. The narratives, as they explain, can often be more compelling than raw data or logical assumptions. There's an examination of two common phenomenon. Prophet Hyman Minksy, an economist of the 60s, called the financial instability hypothesis. During a period of recession or economic stability, people become optimistic and start incurring debts. This confidence and positive perspective about their financial future can make an economy unstable and lead to a recession. Hence, we can't eradicate booms and busts because, as seen, a period of calm can fuel craziness in the economy. In a point of interest is what the hosts referred to as paranoia. Paranoia is thought to ignite success as it keeps people on edge and puts them in a fights mode. This state of paranoia could stem from career uncertainties or the drive to be successful to eliminate future anxieties. Upon reaching success, people tend to relax, thinking they've reached the summit. But this relief eliminates the paranoia and stress that initially gave them the drive, and success begins to dip. This curve can be seen in companies like Sears and IBM, where their initial paranoia-driven success began to decline when they became comfortable in their success. Additionally, an observation was made about intergenerational competition theory. This theory argues that a significant indicator of an individual's quality of life is based on how their generation compares to their parents' generation at that stage of life. Severe disparities have been noted among Gen Z, which could be attributed to various factors, such as inflated living costs or stagnant wages. In society today, the desire for success is not to improve one's life, but rather to be more successful than others. This unhealthy desire brings about a comparison trap where individuals measure their level of success on a skewed baseline, focusing on how their achievements stack up to those of others. This trend is amplified by the rise of social media, which is essentially industrial scale comparison and consequentially industrial scale anxiety. The platforms designed for an algorithmic comparison presents a curated highlight reel of an individual's life, increasing the pressure to exceed others' performance. Furthermore, young girls' mental health has significantly declined due to hormonal birth control, based on studies highlighted during the conversation. There is a suggestion that hormonal birth control has impacted young females' developing brains, along with all the other societal pressures and issues. All these events present a series of factors negatively collaborating against the mental health of society, especially among the Gen Z population. Ultimately, this feeling of comparison and the zealous drive to exceed the others can culminate in endowing individuals with a sense of control. And just reveal this duality in the digital world. differentiating between the experiences that fuel positivity and better responses towards the world, and those that drag individuals into a sphere of toxicity. They warn against acquiring information from sources specifically designed to elicit anger, advising listeners to choose different games that benefit them mentally and emotionally. The podcast delves into the concept of a Blitz scalings practiced in startups, the pursuit of hyperspeed growth. However, as stressed by the hosts, while this approach can seem promising, often it results in a Blitz failing. Things have their natural pace in investing, business, and life, including relationships. In these areas beyond their natural growth rate often leads to disappointment and, in business terms, failure. One example given is the speed at which wealth should grow. For the majority, the natural growth rate is between 5 and 10 per year. Attempts to magnify this figure usually result in financial failure. This rush for growth is compared to the natural world's limitations. Via the story of Robert Wadlow, the tallest human ever, growth due to a pituitary gland abnormality led to numerous health complications, ultimately resulting in his early death. It's highlighted that doubling the size of anything individual, business, wealth doesn't necessarily mean you get the double output. Sometimes expanding size leads to a system collapse. And the hosts relate this principle to business growth too. Rapid expansion, such as a startup going from 20 to 100 employees, can disrupt the initial successful culture. Starbucks is cited as a company that oversaturated the market during its aggressive expansion, which led to a period of decline. Sustainable growth respects the natural and optimal scale. Similarly, in our personal lives, the personality traits and behaviors which once deemed us successful may not necessarily remain beneficial throughout our life stages. And the ounce personality and guiding philosophy is vital during a startup's early stages. The example of Uber's founder, Travis Kalanick, is given. He was instrumental during the company's initial growth, but his very personality traits became a liability as the company scaled. Thus, humans, like businesses, need to acknowledge and adapt to the changing demands of different life stages and situations. Check out the full podcast by clicking the link in the description below. Make sure to like, comment, and subscribe for more content like this. Thank you for listening to this podcast summary episode of the Pod Slice.